Now let's talk about cycling in Norfolk, and campaigners in Norwich say work to improve a section of bike path in the city for a second time could actually make it more dangerous. The £2.5 million plan to improve pedestrian and cycle access and remove the old toilet block on Tombland is due to finish in March. Money for the work has partly come from the Department for Transport's Transforming Cities funds, but concerns are being raised over how suitable it will actually be for bike users. Well, since 2013, Norfolk County Council has been given £12 million of government funding purely for cycle infrastructure and another £38.1 million for city improvements, including cycle paths. Has it been well spent? Let's ask Richard Bearman from the Norwich Cycling Campaign. He's on the line now. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
I mean, the fact that money is being spent in Norfolk on cycle lanes and for more facilities for cyclists, that must please you.
It is, actually, and there has been a fair bit of money spent on cycle lanes, some good, actually, some not so good. But the money that's being spent now from Transforming Cities is not cycling money solely. It's about bus and pedestrian and all sorts of infrastructure. And the problem with the Tombland scheme is, we said this at the beginning, it's being promoted as a benefit to cycles, but actually there's nothing in the scheme that benefits cycling at all. In fact, the scheme has taken out some of the existing cycle path that ran past the north part of Tombland and at Erpingham Gate. That's where we have a problem with the county council. You look at the scheme in detail, there is no cycling facilities per se being put in. And what is happening is that the route that connected the north part of Tombland with St Faith's Lane, and St Faith's Lane, as you know, is a road that goes round the back of Prince of Wales Road and is closed off to motor vehicles. There's a really useful cycling connection down towards the station. The little link service road that was there on Tombland is being taken out and being replaced by a wide paved area.
So I'm thinking about Tombland, certainly when it's not a lockdown and when there aren't roadworks there. It's a busy road, isn't it? Lots of buses stopping, you get a lot of traffic there as well. How possible is it, do you think, to make it safer for cyclists?
Well, we made several suggestions when we met with the County Council. They could have put in some marked cycle facilities across the area between the end of the existing lane opposite Princes Street and St Faith's Lane, but they haven't done so. They've chosen to do a wide paved area with trees and landscaping and seats. I'm sure it will be absolutely lovely for people wandering about. What you won't want is cyclists riding through the middle of it. We've said for a long time that shared use spaces are really not good news for cyclists. They're not good news for pedestrians. And if there's going to be more facilities for restaurants to put their tables and chairs outside there, which I believe is part of the scheme, then they won't want cyclists weaving through the tables past the diners either.
No, and that's something, certainly, as the year has gone on, where there's been hope for that more cafes and more pubs and more restaurants can have seating outside. Do you think actually that's going to end up being detrimental to cyclists, if that's the sort of culture we continue with?
Well, I don't think it works really in the UK. We don't have the continental culture, and I think the best, what we've seen with the Prince of Wales Road, for example, the scheme they put uphill in the Prince of Wales Road, where there is a designated cycle facility on the side of the road as part of the pavement, the pedestrians don't really treat it as a cycleway. It's no good for cycling. It just causes conflict between cyclists and pedestrians. And as for the partially sighted people or people with hearing difficulties, it must make it a nightmare. What we need when we come to spending money on cycling, wherever the money comes from, is things like the Rose Lane facility, which is separated from the pavement and separated from the carriageway. Now, if you come into Tombland from the north, you come up Palace Street, which is part of the Pink Pedalway, you come up the Tombland path, you cannot cross the road to Princes Street to continue. If you want to go on down towards the station way, you've then either got to rejoin that very busy section of carriageway where the bus stops are on the loading bay, or you've got to cycle across a shared use pavement, which people will not be expecting cyclists to, because there's no signage and no designated route. We're not happy about this scheme.
When you think about it, though, in general, you've got drivers, of course, we can't forget about. We've got cyclists, we've got pedestrians. Trying to keep everybody happy on some of Norfolk's narrow streets is not easy, is it?
No, but the Transforming Cities money is about public realm, public transport, cycling and walking. It's not about making things easier for the motorists, I'm afraid, in Norwich city centre.
Richard Bearman, thank you very much for talking to us this morning from the Norwich Cycling Campaign. More on this in an hour's time. I'd be really interested to know what you make of this if you're a cyclist, whether you feel that the policy we've got at the moment to supposedly make life easier and safer for cyclists is actually working. A reminder that Norfolk County Council has had £12 million of government funding since 2013 for cycle infrastructure and £38.1 million for city improvements, which include cycle paths. So if you are a cyclist, actually a lot of money is being spent in Norfolk on supposedly making life better and easier for you when you're out on your bike. But is it working? And I wonder whether you go along with Richard Bearman and would say that actually a lot of it isn't particularly well thought out. But then if you're a driver, if you're a pedestrian, maybe you would have other ideas. Let me know what you think about that this morning. The amount of money being invested in cycling in Norfolk, has it been well spent? 0800 389 7321. Let's return to another story that we've been talking about this morning now, and this is work to improve bike and pedestrian access in Norwich has been slammed as being unsafe by cycling campaigners. The Tombland scheme is costing £2.5 million, part of which is coming from the government's Transforming Cities fund, but concerns are being raised about how suitable it will actually be for bike users. Since 2013, Norfolk County Council has been given £12 million of government funding purely for cycle infrastructure and another £38.1 million for city improvements, including cycle paths. We were talking earlier to Richard Bearman from the Norwich Cycling Campaign. He says the latest work is not a good use of public money.
That's a poor use of public money all round. The money that's being spent on Tombland is more about public realm improvements and enhancements, but the money that was spent on the previous efforts in North Tombland was definitely cycling money, and while that was okay, it's been made less good and less useful by these changes to the southern half of Tombland.
Let's talk more about this with Martin Wilby, who's chair of the Highways, Transport and Infrastructure Committee at Norfolk County Council. Morning, Martin.
Good morning, Chris.
You've had lots of money to spend on making cycling in Norfolk more pleasurable and safer, and yet the Norwich Cycling Campaign, it says what you've done is actually dangerous. Do you go along with that?
No, I don't. I disagree with that. So we've been talking about Tombland, so we all know Tombland's a really busy area in the city. It's very close to the cathedral. Attracts a lot of visitors there, especially to tourists and also local people. But what we need to do is have a balance. So what we're doing in this project is including benefit or improving the benefits for those that cycle through the area, pedestrians, public transport users, motorists, and businesses. It's important that we have a balance so that we can support everyone that wants to use this really important part of the city, and also supporting the businesses that are there.
You've mentioned a lot of different groups of people there who all have different interests, from people driving buses, people driving cars, people on bikes, pedestrians, trying to keep them all happy on, not necessarily just on Tombland, but on some parts of Norfolk and Norwich where the streets are quite narrow. How much of a challenge is that?
It is a challenge. We've got a very historic city and historic area, and a lot of our streets are narrow. So we have to strike a balance so that that everybody can enjoy the city and the surrounding area as best as possible. We've received this funding and from DFT, and we've also had, plus that, added to that is investment from our local bus companies and also some local money. So overall, over the next 2-3 years, we're investing up to £59 million in the area. So that's got to be a good thing. But it's important that we put it to good use.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's how you invest it, isn't it? We're talking about millions and millions of pounds at the moment, and money isn't in plentiful supply for a lot of people at the moment. So to have this money coming into Norfolk is great. But you've got people like Richard Bearman from the Norwich Cycling Campaign who don't really trust the county council to spend it wisely.
So some of our investments, we're already seeing big improvements in the city, such as the Westgate area, pedestrianised and can be used for cycling. We're also investing wider, if you like, a cycle path between Heatherset, Wyndham to Norwich, and people are using it. In the city, the cycling figures last year, I think we're up over 40%, so that's a good sign that people are using, coming into the city on their bikes, and currently I believe it's about 50% up, possibly a bit of that's due to the lockdown. So, the improvements we're making are obviously working.
Isn't this the problem, though? You're trying to be all things to all people still, and you can't spend lots of money on cycling and still have as many cars in the city centre. It's always difficult when you get to the point in the road, inevitably, where cars and bikes have to come together. Don't you have to have a more clear policy about how many cars you want in the city centre compared to bikes?
We've got to attract people to the city. The city is, before the lockdown, back in the trend of visitor numbers, tourists and also shoppers, and we want to keep that going. So it's about providing the infrastructure for the mix of people that want to travel into the city. We have car parks in the city centre where people need to access, and we have improved cycle racks and cycle places and improved pedestrians. So it's about a mix, and it's about getting that mix safe and secure to give everybody the confidence to come into the city and use those.
Martin Wilby from Norfolk County Council, thanks for joining us. If you are a cyclist and you're listening to that this morning, we've talked about the millions and millions of pounds that has either been spent or is in the offing in Norfolk, and I wonder whether you would tell me whether you feel it has been put to good use. Do you feel safer on your bike than you did a few years ago going around Norfolk and particularly into Norwich? Let me know what you think on that this morning. 0800 389 7321. You can text 81333, start your message with the word Norfolk.
On cycling, we talked about Tombland earlier and the work going on there. Derek in Norwich says, where to start? The first bit of work that was completed in Tombland made the Erpingham Gate area look lovely but useless to cyclists. They've now taken away a safe crossing, which has made it way more dangerous. And in Upper King Street, they put in 2 bus stops, which makes it far worse for cyclists. As a cyclist, I'm fed up with the shared use cycle path. It's a toxic mix. Pedestrians don't like it, and cyclists don't like it either. And Richard in the city centre says, I'm a huge fan of city cycling and I commuted everywhere by bike when I lived in London, but please, can you remind cyclists that using the pavement, unless it's a designated cycle path, is both dangerous and illegal? The local authority have spent a small fortune installing new cycle paths here on both Rose Lane and Prince of Wales Road, yet some cyclists seem to ignore them and quite happily fly down the pavement. Just because the traffic may make it dangerous for cyclists, that doesn't give them an excuse to cycle on the pavement and make it dangerous for pedestrians. Thank you for that.